Welcome to the lecture of physical education. Today we will be discussing about an athletic event, that is discus throw. The history of discus throwing. The sport of discus throwing dates back to ancient Greece, where it was prized for its display of an athlete's coordination combined with his physical strength. Discus throw is one of the earliest games played in the Olympiad, along with other similar sports such as javelin. It is still a widely practiced competitive sport today and hasn't changed dramatically over the past few thousand years. Origin. Discus throwing emerged in ancient Greece around 708 BC, where it was added to 18th Olympiad, says Olympia, Greece. Discus was a part of pentathlon, which also included jumping, wrestling, running and javelin. It is shaped like a flying saucer. The ancient Greeks made discuses from lead, bronze, iron and stone according to the Perseus Digital Library at Tufts University. The discuses were made in varying weights depending on whether the competition consists of men or boys. A typical discus weighed about 4.5 to 13 pounds or 2 to 6 kg and measured about 8 1/4 to 13 1/4 inches or approximately 21 to 34 centimeter as noted by the International Association of Athletics Federation. Development. By 632 BC, the Olympic Games in ancient Greece were extended to 1 week, and the game of discus throwing was one of the 50 events in Olympics by 500 BC. According to the International Association of Athletic Federation, discus throwing was included in the modern Olympic Games in Athens in 1896. Discus throwers stood on a pedestal that was about 24 to 27.5 inches. The following year, the US held a discus throwing event that utilized a circle about 7 feet in diameter. In 1907, the discus itself was standardized in the competitive sport to about 4.5 pound or 2 kg and 8 2/3 inches or 22 centimeters in diameter. The discus throwing circle increased to more than 8 feet across by 1908. The modern day concrete throwing circle wasn't introduced till 1954. Significance. According to the International Association of Athletic Federation, different styles of discus throwing evolved as the sport gained worldwide popularity in early 19s. Single hand and both hand competitions were developed during this time along with Nordic swinging throw style. In 1926, C. Hauser introduced the modern day style of skipping and turning before releasing the discus. American women joined the discus throwing sport competitively in 1914, using a discus weighing about 3 1/3 pound or 1.5 kg. In 1928, the Olympic Games began using 2 1/5 pound or 1 kg standard discus for women. Modern day. According to Tufts University, although the pedestal throwing circles, discus sizes and weights have changed over many centuries, yet the sport hasn't changed substantially from its roots. Discus throwing still contains the same basic objective, that is, to throw the discus farther than your opponent. Today, It is noted by the International Association of Athletic Federation that discus throwing is an official sport with competitions throughout the world. But discus origin and modern day competitions in the Olympic Games will always be heavily associated with the sport. The discus throw is a slinging throw. The implement has to be thrown from a circle of 2.5 meter in diameter. By rotation inside the circle, the greatest possible acceleration is imparted to the discus. Measurement and specification. The bottom of the body of the discus should be made of wood or other suitable material with a metal rim, the edge of which should be circular. Each side should be identical without any projections. The minimum weight should be 2 kg for men and 1 kg for women. The approved discus dimensions for men's and women's competitions are shown in the diagram below. In this event, an athlete holds the discus against the palm of the throwing arm with the finger ends around the edge, facing away from the direction of the throw. He or she then rapidly makes 1.5 spin before propelling the discus into the air with a sidearm throw. For safety reasons, as in the hammer throwing event, discus trials should be made from an enclosure or cage. Most of the specifications for the discus circles are the same as that of those for the hammer throw circle and should be 2.5 meter or 8 feet. Competitors may have 2 practice trials only. They may neither wear gloves nor apply any substance on their shoes in the throwing circle, can adopt any position of their own choice. Athletes should commence their throw from a stationary position within the circle. It is considered a foul if, having started to make a throw, a competitor touches the ground outside the circle or the top of the circle rim with any part of the body. A competitor should not leave the circle until the discus has touched the ground. The rules relating to leaving the circle or beginning a fresh trial are the same as for the hammer and shot outlined previously. For a throw to be valid, the discus should land completely within the inner edges of the line, marking a sector of 40 degrees. In the discus, first strikes the cage before landing within the sector. The throw should not be considered invalid. If breaks during a fair throw, it should not count as a trial. Immediately after a fair throw, the distance should be measured from the nearest mark in the ground made by the discus to the inside of the circumference of the circle, along a line drawn to the center of the circle. Measurements should be recorded in even centimeter units to the nearest unit below the distance measured if that distance is not a whole even centimeter. Technique. A rational technique in the discus throw has the following characteristics. In the initial position, the thrower has his back towards the direction of the throw. There follows a long flat jump turn with a flight phase. The slinging movements called the release takes place after a spring-like push-off by both feet. Handhold. The hand is placed flat against the discus surface. The upper joint of the finger grasps the rim of the discus. Its CG lies between index and the middle finger. Due to a slight bending, the upper face of the discus touches the arm. This gives the required looseness of the muscles and prevents the discus from falling out of the hand in the subsequent movements. The initial position. The thrower assumes a position at the rear edge of the circle, with the back facing in the direction of throwing. The feet are about shoulder width apart from the toes turned outwards. The athlete is in the relaxed sitting down position. The body weight is evenly distributed over both feet. The right arm is hanging loosely by the right side, holding the discus. The preliminary swing. The purpose of the preliminary swing is to create the longest possible acceleration path of the implement. The width of the preliminary swing, which is important for an optimum radius of the initial path of the discus, depends on the position of legs and the athlete's flexibility at the hip and the shoulder joints. The swinging movements are introduced by bringing the arm with the implement at the hip or shoulder level across to the left side of the body. The body weight is thereby easily moved from the right to the left leg. Almost without any interruption, there follows the actual preliminary swing in which the discus is brought far back behind the right shoulder. The body weight is now slightly transferred to the right. This swing is easily performed in any easy relaxed manner. The upper body with the left arm curled across the chest moves along in the direction of the swing, producing at this stage a good torque with wind up between the hip and the shoulder axis. The left heel is slightly raised from the ground. Discus thrower should not turn the toes to the left foot into the swinging direction, since this would prevent the optimum wind up and unnecessarily lengthen the path of the left foot at the beginning of the turn. The upper body is kept upright. The turn in the circle. The purpose of the turn is to accelerate the discus continuously on the longest possible path. The beginning of the drive across the circle, the thrower's body and the implement are accelerated simultaneously. But during the turn, the legs are allowed to move ahead of the trunk and the arm with the discus, thus creating torque or wind up between the hip and the shoulder axis as a result of two different acceleration phases. The thrower leads the turn with his legs. The left leg begins to spin around on the ball of the foot in the throwing direction. During this turning inward movement, the weight of the body is transferred and is supported by both legs. The throwing position. After the turn, the thrower must be in a well-placed position, permitting him to apply a full effective force to the discus. The body weight is well over a bent right leg. The right foot lands at the center of the circle at an angle ranging between 100 to 150 degrees to the direction of the throw. The left leg, which is slightly flexed, has been set on the ground over the inner edge of the foot. In the throwing position, the feet should be about 70 to 80 centimeters. The left foot meets the ground about 10 centimeters from the ground edge of the circle and at about 10 to 15 centimeters left of the direction of the throwing. The angle between the throwing direction and the left foot is about 90 degrees. The arm holding the discus is still well back to the right to allow the maximum pull of the implement. In the throwing position, the implement still has an arc of about 270 degrees to the transverse. The right hip is ahead of the right side of the body. The trunk is erect and the left side of the body is in a fixed position, forming a straight line from the foot to the shoulder. The torque or the wind up of the right side of the body is 70 to 90 degrees between the axis of the shoulder and the hip, and with about 45 to 60 degrees between the shoulder and the throwing arm. The torque thus obtained is started at the end of the preliminary swing and is maintained right action when unwinding takes place during the release. If the torque is reduced while still in the throwing position, this is usually due to a delayed landing of the left foot. The release. The release is the most important phase in the entire movement of discus throwing. It determines the most significant angles, the angle of release and the angle of incidence of the airborne implement, as well as the speed and the height of the release. This action is introduced by turning the right side of the body around foot, knee and hip. The left side of the body forms a lever which counteracts the pressure of the right leg. During this swiveling movement of the right side of the body weight remains over the right leg. When the axis of the hip has reached an angle about 125 degree to the direction of the throw, the unwinding of the right side of the body begins. At this juncture, the rotating motion goes over into the stretching movement, which is so powerful in its final phase that feet come off the ground momentarily. The chest faces in the throwing direction. The right arm is still retracted well behind the right side of the body and describes a wind radius in coming forward. The release is accompanied by a spring push-up with both feet from the ground. The discus is released at about shoulder height with the back of the hand turned upwards. A rotating movement is imparted to the implement in its clockwise spin by a strong tangential pull with the index finger. This will give it stability during flight. This swiveling or rotating axis in the release is not the diagonal of the left foot and the right shoulder, but the left side of the body. The reverse. As a result of the powerful stretching of both legs, the feet lose contact with the ground for a split second and an upward and forward springing. Immediately the discus lifts the thrower's hand and he will reverse his feet to prevent himself from fouling at the front of the circle and to regain the balance. Technical training. The method of teaching the discus throw has been considerably changed during recent years. It is now generally accepted that the phase influencing the whole sequence of movement is the release. Therefore, the strictly analytical procedure has been abandoned to a great extent, so that when basic skills have been acquired, teaching of the overall movement is started relatively earlier. The Trustev method, frequently described in earlier publications, is nowadays taught in a simplified form. A splitting up of the whole rotation movement into quarter turns has been discarded. Special preparatory exercises. In the special preparatory exercises for the discus, an emphasis is given to the preparation for the slinging throw, combined with the strengthening of the muscles involved in the throwing action. The slinging movement is the main phase in the discus throw and should therefore be thoroughly drilled. Additionally, various turn jumps, throw from turns, etc. serve to develop orientation in circular movement. The following exercises are recommended. Long throws on a basic competitive using a sling ball or a rubber ball ring. Various games involving the sling throw using a sling ball or rubber ring. Gymnastic routines for developing mobility. Jumps with a turnover low obstacles. The stress should be on space-gaining movements. A sequence of jumps with turns on a line. Exercise for accustoming the thrower with the discus. Forward and backward swinging of the throwing arm, which hangs loosely at the side of the body. The purpose of this exercise is to develop the feel for easy and relaxed movement of the throwing arm and to get accustomed to holding the discus while moving. After forward swinging of the throwing arm, the discus is allowed to roll over the index finger along the ground. This rolling is an important condition for stable spinning of the discus in flight. The arm holding the discus swing in front of the body, describing the path of an imaginary figure of 8. The back of the hand must be turned upward throughout. Duties of the officials. A minimum of 6 judges are required to judge effectively. The function and position of the judge is Judge 1, who is the leader. His function is to call up rear and front of the circle, warning horn, time lapse and measure. Judge 2, who is also the recorder. He checks, measure, implements and exit from the circle. The recorder records all decisions taken by the instructions given by the chief judge. These notes must be accessible during and after the competition for reference. Judge number 3. His position is in front of the circle. He tapes through circle, supervises, warms up and flags. Judge 4. He is the sector judge. He spike. Equipment for chief judge. Broom to sweep sector, rag to clean sector and equipment, carpet for athlete to clean feet, performance board, record flags, measuring tape, stopwatch plus batteries, order of draw list program or the list of events, entry ticket into competition area, result card, black ball point pen, clipboard, flag of green or red color. Conclusion. Discus throw is a game in athletics in the track and field events in which a discus shaped object known as discus is thrown for a maximum distance. In modern competitions, the discus is thrown from a circle 2.5 meters or 8.2 feet in diameter with a fall within the 40-degree sector marked on the ground from the center of the circle. The sport was one of the 5 events included in the pentathlon in the ancient Olympic Games. Throwing the discus was introduced as an event in modern athletics when the Olympic Games were revived at Athens in 1896. That's all with today's lecture. I hope this must have lifted up your concerns about this important concepts. Thank you. Have a nice time and goodbye.